Today we're going to talk about moving forward, and this idea that the word resilience is something that we toss this word around. Academics like to use the word resilience and how we're preparing for it a lot. But, there might be a better word than resilience when we actually think about on the ground measures that we are taking to be these healthy, thriving communities that we really want to see. And when you think about how extreme storms, extreme events, and disastrous wildfires kind of are coming up against our goals for larger, resilient communities, then our leaders here, we're going to talk about that today. So thank you. I'm going to kind of start out with each of you, maybe just saying a few words. We all know you here, but for our recordings online, you could just give a couple of introductory statements about your history in the area.
So, Woody, start, Ashley?
Yes, thank you.
So Woody Klein, I'm a District 3 supervisor right now for Gila County. I was born here in Globe, went to grade school here in Globe. Been living between here and Young since then. Currently I'm in Young and have been for the last quite a number of years. And so straight out of high school, went to work for the Forest Service, worked with them till 2005. When I got out of the Forest Service, I was the FMO and president. So that's me.
Just learned something new. I did not know you worked for the Forest Service. Todd, what is
the town manager for Town of Superior. I've been there for about 5 years now. I was on the fire department for about 13, 14 years before that. And that's it. I'm short and sweet.
Al Gamaros, Mayor City of Globe, on my second term, 5 years in now. I retired from the fire department in Globe. I was there 30 years and 18 years as a fire chief there. I was born and raised in Globe in Miami, and so really care about this community.
Sammy Gonzalez, mayor for the town of Miami, lifelong resident, born and raised in Miami, never left. Been mayor for about 1.5 years now, and been on council for about 10, 11 years, someplace around there. I lost track. And I am an educator in Miami High School school district.
Thanks. And so starting with you, Mayor Gonzalez, with our first question, how will our communities continue to not only survive, but thrive in the face of these kind of climate threats and fire? And also, if you could give some examples of local policies or initiatives that you have in mind or would like to see enacted.
Man, there's multiple questions there.
I have two parts. Answers you will.
Our community, like you said, they're very resilient. And, with all the events that have happened, the community has known what we've gone through and what we went through. And it's because of a small community, I believe, and everybody watches everybody's backs, and everybody has, they lend a hand when needed. And so I think in the future, if any other catastrophes or epidemics or any kind of issues that come through, that it will be the same because of the resiliency that we have. We do have a lot of policies in place working in the future for future possibly flooding. A lot of mitigations. ADOT just finished their work across where we're at right now on ADOT Bridge to prevent any kind of future. And so the county, and maybe Mr. Klein will probably talk about this a little bit. They just received $8 million to help mitigate for future problems. So there's a lot of projects. We do have probably about, I think we're going to probably take about $200,000 worth of it and clean out Miami Wash all the way down to Vander Park. And so, we do projects and in place to kind of prevent some of these issues to arise.
And just a quick follow-up to that, did ADOT has helped identify bridges and structures at risk, and you're working actively with them? Has that been a smooth process?
So ADOT only has this bridge that they're responsible in our town limits. We do have on Sullivan Street our bridges, and we did get a structural engineer that came out and inspected, and all the bridges are still working conditions with no issues from the flooding.
So do any of our other panel members want to follow up with their thoughts on policies or for the future?
Yeah, I'll follow up a little bit on that also. We need to learn from our, how it went in these last events with the fires and the flooding. I think this is something we're going to need to plan for the next 2, 3, 5 years, depending, because we're going to have this flooding going on, and we still have the potential for fire. So as we move forward, we really need to put it in our strategic action plans for the future and come up with potential funding to help us do that. And a lot of that's going to be through lobbying through the state. They're going to have to come up with funding to help us out. We can't do it. We aren't able to do that. I think what we saw was, I know in our city that we have to review and update our emergency operations plan, because I think that's important. I don't think that's been updated since shortly after 9/11, where we even had our own emergency operations center in the city of Globe. Even though the county had theirs, we had ours, but we were able to collect the data, the information, and get it to the people. I think the frustrating part of this, what we saw was people were frustrated. They wanted answers right away, and it's hard to get those answers, especially when people have different modes of communication, whether it's social media, radio, whatever it is. But we need to be able to do a better job of communicating with these people. And I think for the future, and I've had a conversation with Mr. Bromley, we need to become a Firewise community designation, because we need to, just like this meeting, I wish we had had more of the community that was aware. We saw some great presentations yesterday. We saw some today of growth and why things are happening. And the community needs to be educated, and so we can prepare ourselves for the future to decrease the amount of damage.
Yes. Yeah.
So with that, and what the mayor says is absolutely correct. And so what we've seen in the past, especially on the side of the drainages, the washes, the canyons, over all these years, there's been a huge buildup in these washes. A lot of it has been because of policy, not necessarily from the town or whatever. It could have been from the state, where ADQ or whoever it was wouldn't allow you into those drainages to clean them out and keep them cleaned out. That has changed. And so with the events that's been going on, that opened a lot of eyes. And so with the money, like the mayor brought up, the $8 million, and that's where it's targeted. That's what it's targeted to do, is to go in these drainages and muck them out and clean them up and get them back to where maybe they originally were at one time, so that they will allow that water to run instead of just build them back up. Right now with the state of these draws, with the silt and the buildup in them, it holds that water back. And so that's one of the reasons why we had the issues we did. So we're hoping to get in there and really clean those out and help that. What Mayor Gamaros was saying about the future is 100%. Thank God the state came out with that $100 million. Had they not have done that, we'd have been in a world of hurt right now. I don't know what we would have been doing. But with that money, that has allowed us to try and tackle these issues. One of the things that I believe, and mayors, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's been quite a few years since we've had this extensive flooding problems. We've got a lot of folks that live down pretty close to these drainages, basically, right up out of the banks. But they haven't seen this kind of flooding in a lot of years. I say that the fires is what caused this, by burning off that vegetation. There's nothing out there to hold it, so it all comes off. But back in the day, a long time ago, when I was a kid, we used to have some flooding here just naturally from the winters, the springs, and whatever. But it's been a long time. We haven't seen that. And so the mayor's right. A lot of people were frustrated because water's running through their buildings or around them, and they're wanting something done right now. And that's very, very tough. We put our crews out there, we do what we can, but it's really tough. So right now, going forward, what I see is a chance to look back and learn from all this and really focus on the areas, the future problems that we're gonna have, because the mayors are correct. This isn't over. We still got another couple of years, I would say at least, until this kind of starts backing off. And so policy-wise, I think some attitudes and some things have changed as far as the drainage mitigations go. I think that's going to be a big help. And from a county, working with the cities, I think we need to stay in there and be a partner with all three of us and whoever else. I mean, we got a lot more coming to us, I'm sure, in the future, but we need to band together, work all these issues out and keep them going. Thank you.
Thanks. And Todd, as a town manager, you have about, I don't know, 1,000 hats that you wear day to day. And you're also outside of Gila County. Can you give a little perspective from town superior?
Sure. There are, for the problems from the Telegraph fire are essentially in two buckets. You have the fire impacts and you have the flooding impacts. Flooding impacts, the part of the issue has been we've been in 20 years of drought. We also have communities that go into wash areas and build our downtowns right adjacent to washes. So we have concentrated those flows into very small areas where it used to open out into floodplain areas and the flow would slow down, or it would get into canyon areas and speed up. All those natural systems are changed. So now that we're getting higher flows that we haven't seen for the last 20 years, all of those flood conditions are being accentuated. So our community is addressing that through looking for ways to open up areas where people have added berms to try to concentrate the flow and speed it up, to allow areas for the flow to spread out and slow down. But the floodplain laws, they have a lot of restrictions and a lot of property issues. So when you start getting into what's allowed in the floodplain, what we can, where the funding is to address those issues, it gets very complex, and we need somebody like Ashley to come and tell us how to access that and how to plan for that. So that's the floodplain bucket, and it hasn't affected Superior the way it has affected these upper areas. There's a lot. The watersheds are much larger here. When the fire hits them, the flows are much higher, and so it's very concentrated through Globe and Miami. So they're going to have a much greater problem with this new calculus. But none of these washes are sufficient. None of the old designs are going to work. So we're not just going to have to repair what's there. We're going to have to come up with new treatment methods to deal with the flood. That's going to take government support beyond $100 million allotment. It's going to take yearly regular maintenance on these washes and a straight funding source to help get those things done. From the fire side, patterns have changed. Superior used to be, when we did our Pinal County Wildland Urban Interface Plan when I was in the fire department a good decade ago, Superior had more fire starts than anywhere else. I don't know why, but if you start putting a little fire triangle on every named fire over the town of Superior for the last 40 years, you can't see the town. So they used to be small fires. It'd be a 100-acre fire, worst case 2,000-acre fire. Now those fires are turning into 100,000-acre fires that come up and affect Globe, Miami. That model has been the model that has been most damaging for our communities over the last few years. We don't have a perception on any level beyond our local level that the Sonoran Desert is a fire problem, and that the Tonto National Forest, where it meets the Sonoran Desert, is a forest. Everybody thinks forest means big trees, means Flagstaff. There's lots of treatment plans. There's lots of consensus around getting us money to do things about that. But when you start talking about, I needed to go in and cut 100 acres of mesquite scrub, people will say, well, that's not the forest, and that's not, the mesquite is probably native and it shouldn't be a problem, and why are we doing that anyway? And so we have to build, because of our microecologies, our little microecosystems that are in the transition between the high and low desert. Globe, Miami, we're like other places, but we're also unique. So building a consensus around what fuels treatments looks like and what we should be doing to protect against fire isn't going to get larger reach than our local area. So we have to be united in taking that up to the Fed and the state and say, look, for this area, this is what we need to do to protect our community. And when you start looking for forestry management, Go look on YouTube and put forestry management. You'll see 50 videos about what to do about tall pines. There's nothing about what to do about Sonoran Desert. So we're going to have to kind of develop our own treatment methods, and for a completely new condition, a completely, the fire spread is so much greater, so much faster. We put together a coalition when this first happened because the $100 million does not include money for fire prevention. It's just mitigation of the past impacts of the Telegraph fire. So we put together a coalition. We have a plan to do fire breaks around all of our communities. We've worked with everybody in this room pretty much to discuss this issue. Superior has put out 3 grants so far. The first 2 have been turned down. I think it is a perception issue by the people up higher, and there's also a certain lack of ability on our level to be able to produce documents that other people will see and understand. And is our forestry, are we protecting the sequoias? No, we don't have that emotional stuff. Do we have the ecological, we're protecting this bunny rabbit? We don't have that argument. Not every forestry management project is sexy. Not every forestry management project has a triple bottom line for the ecosystem and for everything else. Some things just need to be done because it's a safety issue. But unless we can show positive reuse of our wood products, unless we can show that that we're not damaging the bunny rabbit, we aren't going to get funded. So there also needs to be systems where there's a certain assumption that in the wildland urban interface, that money needs to be spent out for just that development of safe space. And it has to be done not just on, this plan we put together includes 4 different mines, it includes counties, it includes towns, it includes Fed, BLM, and forestry. So what's the path to get all of those things approved? Where's the plan that we can show each of those agencies that this is our plan for our region and how we're going to address it?
Yeah, and that's actually a great, I think, segue into the next question, and how we are taking these steps right now, taking a disaster as an opportunity to hit on, 10 of the things. You covered a lot there. So some of these changes that need to be addressed in terms of the technical assistance. We're in a Sonoran Desert environment, and a lot of people don't view that as the same as pine, and there's not as much understanding about how to treat a fire-adapted system. The floodways and working with state and federal agencies to be able to define floodplains and how your communities, which is something that all of us have in common, right? Our communities coming up straight into the drainage, against the drainage, I mean. And then these also attitudes about what mitigation means. So on that note, maybe, well, anyone who wants to speak on this, how do we maintain momentum and work on not just recovery, but mitigation?
I can jump in. So I think we have to rely on a lot of resources, and we know, kind of like what Mayor Gamaros was stating earlier about, we're in this for probably 3 to 5 years of the flooding. And so we have to look at ways that we have to recover from that. And some of the ways we could probably look at is, getting with the Forest Service and looking at maybe assisting in any way, or asking for assistance on reseeding some of those areas that to get growth back. I know that the federal government is pretty tied up with a lot of funds, but like they said, or like Mayor Romero said earlier, looking for help and any kind of assistance to help in that. And then, as the town manager from Superior stated earlier, looking at fire breaks. In the canals, I know it's difficult, I know it's tough, but in our region and our area, I think that's probably one of the biggest concerns is, to prevent any of that encroachment into our communities. And so having, there is no fire breaks. And so that's a big, to work on possibly and get some funding for that.
Yeah, I'm taking furious little notes on the margins. I don't have enough space because I really hope that we can, this is the small group, right? This is that Mark and Johnny talked about, that we want to be able to go after this meeting and take you up on these suggestions. So when you were saying seeding and assistance from the Forest Service, the county is also doing work, and Mayor Damaris, I'm going to come back to you, but I was wondering if Supervisor Klein could speak to the reseeding efforts.
Yeah, I can, real quick, and then I'd like to talk about the other two. So, back in time, the Forest Service had what was called a bear team, and Adam, they don't have that. It's not called that anymore. It's called something else, but I'm old, so I gotta go back to what it was called. But anyway, the bear teams would roll in after an incident. After a fire hit, the bear teams would come in, they'd do their assessments, and with the bear team came money for mitigation and rehab projects on the incidents. That meant that they would do the seeding projects. That meant that they would, tend to the roads. They'd go back and cover up fire lines and fire breaks that were built to stop the fires. And they would do all these different things with a different pot of money, basically, than suppression. That has changed. And so now when it comes to efforts as far as getting the infrastructure back going again, seeding, whatever it is, roads, things like that, the district rangers, the line officers will apply for other monies and may or may not get them. It's a crapshoot. Or they may get a portion of it, and which goes back into whether it's fence lines, water tanks, roads, pipelines, all these different things. The one thing everybody needs to keep in mind is in the last 12 years, NRCS has put millions of dollars on the ground on public lands, on these permits. And so when you have these big incidents, you're losing miles of pipelines, you're losing miles of fences and all that. So the line officers try and get some money back that'll come back in and replace these. Sometimes they get some money, sometimes they get partial money, sometimes they don't get any money. So then what has been happening in the 5 years I've been a supervisor is when the Forest Service gets done, they leave, and then the county ends up working with the line officers and whoever's left behind to try and mitigate a lot of these issues. And the county does not have the funds to go in there and spend several $1 million on an incident to put it back together. We don't have it. And so we start looking for grant monies and everything like that. Reseeding projects or efforts is a real good, quick way to get things back to stabilize the soil. Because like you guys have seen, when those incidents come through and you got the panel sitting here above you, you get all that erosion. All that water comes off, it washes everything down. It comes through and plugs up our washes, it ends up in the lake eventually. But if you can get back in there and do some kind of mitigation that'll help hold that soil in place, it isn't going to be as bad. But you're looking at a year for it to really get established. So you kind of got to start pretty quick. So the county this year, what happened was we took over an admin site in Young. Well, right down that admin site, there was a seed storage shed there. And in the past, we had seed harvesting projects up there that Game and Fish partnered with us on. And we had a harvester, and I'd put some people on it in the fall of the year in October and harvest seeds, native seeds. A lot of those seeds were still there. And then also they had quite an accumulation of seeds from the Rodeo Chest Sky Fire that was still in that building. So I got with the line officer in Payson, Matt Pechorik, and he said, yeah, use it, take it. So we brought all that down. We got to talking around. The U of A, I think, is working with El Capitan as well on some things. So a lady from Tucson, Kathy, is that where she's from? Angie?
I think she's actually from like around, she's in Cochise County. So
Okay.
Arizona.
Anyway, it's Arizona Community Foundation had gotten a hold of us and said they had a little handful of money and how could they help? So we told them about the seeding projects and how we'd like to build on that and make it better. They donated about $20,000, and then the wildland restoration outfit in Tucson put the package together, and those seeds are going to El Capitan now. And so there's, I don't know, 600-700 pounds of seed that's going to go in there. Not enough. I'd like to see a whole lot more, but it's a start, you know. And so I think it's all about money. That's what it's all about. Seeds don't come cheap. And these incidents, when they burn 15, 20,000 acres in a whack, it's a lot of area to cover. And so it really goes back to the fact, who's going to pay the cost to try and put these areas back whole again as close as you can get it. You know, and there's some benefits out of this too as well. I was talking to Adam about earlier, when you burn those chaparral fields, the last thing you want to do is leave them alone and let them re-sprout and grow back, and you'll look like Southern California in another 4 or 5 years, and it has the opportunity to burn again. So, you know, like talking to the folks in El Capitan, it's like, you guys really, you know, as bad as this was, you have a benefit here to look at your ground, look at your area that's moonscaped, and figure out how you want to go back and design this to keep it that way, to break up that composition of fuels, to keep it from building back up and making another run through your communities. So there's a lot there, but ultimately it comes down to money, and it takes a lot of money to put things back together after these incidents are done. And like I said, this is the fifth incident we've had since I've been in office, big incidents, so.
And Mary Lata, who is the fire ecologist that spoke yesterday, would be so happy to talk about mosaic landscape and how important that is.
So, fire ecology isn't something that's new. It's been around a long time. Back in the day, we actually went through and did a lot of tree ring surveys. So in the upper elevations, you know, but that gave us the history we needed on the fire ecology. One thing that we learned, which would be the upper end of Gila County all across the rim, Gila County is second to Florida in lightning occurrence strikes. So the history of fire in the pine type is quite frequent. It showed a lot of fire and low intensities, which made sense because back in the day, back then, Smokey the Bear wasn't around to put these fires out. And so the fires were allowed to creep around and burn and do their things, which they cleaned up a lot of those fuels that were on the ground and killed back and burned back a lot of that regrowth that was trying to grow. So your stands were running about 30 stems per acre, which is like a park, which is really cool. The Sonoran Desert, we just had this discussion the other day in AJ. It was a really good discussion, you know, and everybody has the same concerns. What do we do to save the Sonoran Desert? How do we protect our backyards that are backed up against the Sonoran Desert? Doing treatments in the Sonoran Desert is tricky because if you go in there and you disturb that ground and you do some things and you have a good winter, your grass grows back really, really well. From a permatease standpoint, we like seeing that. That's good. But from a fire standpoint, that's not so good. So you got to kind of balance that out, you know, and figure how you can do like your fuel breaks. You can put your fuel breaks in position. You can treat them however you think it's going to work, but you got to think about the rest of it too. Sonoran Deserts, if there's no fuel, it doesn't burn. That's all there is to it. In the chaparral type, veg type, it's going to burn. If you've got the ignition source and you've got the heat, and especially after the drought when your live fuel moistures are zeroed out, it's going to burn. It's going to be really hard to handle. Sonoran Desert's a little bit different. And so that was a big discussion. And to come up with a strategy to do fuel breaks wasn't hard. What was hard was how do you keep that going and keep the rest of it going? You know, the saguaros are standing all over there around Superior and Gold Canyon and AJ. People like saguaros. You know, you look at the beeline, drive out the beeline, hit the pace and see how many live saguaros are left there. Not a lot of them. They're just burnt candles. So that's a bigger discussion, but there's a lot of work. But reseeding is a huge plus, especially for stabilizing the soils. It really helps. And so we're committed to try and do that. I've also been in conversation with Game and Fish to try and maybe put together a seed harvesting program for native seeds, which will be tough. Actually, I'd rely on you a lot for that because we don't want to harvest the wrong seeds. So, you know, so that's something I'm kind of looking at as well, but it all comes down to money.
Thank you, Supervisor Klein, and I wanted to pass it to Mayor Gomeros, and we've covered a lot of ground between already in this panel. And so I wanted to throw it back to you if you wanted to respond to any of these comments, but also get back to this idea of momentum and opportunities to address intervention, and as we also do recovery.
Yeah, I agree with Supervisor Klein. You know, it's going to take a collaboration between the town of Miami, Gila County, and the expertise of the Forest Service in our community, because ours is different than what Superior is and how we move forward. It was interesting to hear the Bear team yesterday when they talked about their assessment of the roads and the ground and stuff like that. But the funding really isn't there to actually do mitigation to make things come back. I mean, they talked about mulching at $700 an acre, and it really wasn't feasible with the amount of acreage that needed to be mulched. So with little success, but I think it's important that we need to continue as a government to continue to solicit the state. We need funding. They can't continue to cut forestry and other programs in the situation we're in right now. So it's going to take us to really move forward to get that funding every year. We need, it's there. The burn scar is there. The rain is here. We got to be able to have the funding to keep the waterways moving smoothly and somehow put some barriers that protect some areas. We've seen water flow in this year that I've ever seen, and I've lived here my whole life. I've never seen water flow where it has. And I see they're doing some mitigation by Kaiser. They're putting up some engineered walls there, and that's to protect. We have the railroad we got to protect also that runs through our community. So, and again, you're right, Supervisor. It takes money. We got to have the money. The state needs to allocate money to our communities so we can manage it for the future.
Keith, are you taking notes, Keith? Congressman Halloran's office. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that after this panel, we can kind of keep these conversations going. There's a lot of such specific ideas that.
Actually, can I add one more real quick thing here? It's kind of a pet peeve of mine too, but we can talk about projects all day long, especially on the public land side, on national forest. But Keith, until that T&E Species Act is dealt with, projects are hard, and I'm gonna just give you, I'm not gonna dwell on this very long, because I could spend the rest of the day on it. But when you take the panels, there's probably an X amount number of alpacs in the panels. So when these guys want to go do a treatment in the panels, they got to do certain standards inside those alpacs. Save the nest tree, be specific on what they're going to take, on and on and on. It's really kind of pretty much ties their hands behind their back. That needs to be addressed going forward. And I can give you another example. The Mogollon Rim on the Pleasant Valley District alone, we had 28 alpacs on the face of that rim. It made it so impossible, we couldn't do any treatments on that rim. We couldn't do it. We couldn't get through the NEPA process and the T&E species of Fish and Wildlife Service in order to pull those projects off. And so what do? You sit there and wait until a rodeo chest guy fire comes through there and it burns it all up. The rangers submit a take on the packs and you go on with life. And that's not the way the system is designed. But it needs to be changed so that these guys have the opportunity to do these projects, if it's a fuel break on the panels or wherever it may be. So
Good example.
Just wanted to add that.
So I wanted to, we're talking about coordination, we're talking about the funds necessary. And I think you all have a pretty good idea of, we've already talked about what kind of results you'd like to see. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of whether it be kind of the culture changes, working with communities, increased coordination?
Our region has had some recent success in coalition grants, and the county took lead on the recent EPA grant. This is an excellent opportunity for us to look for a regional grant source. USDA is a good example. They have a separate, outside of the forestry, through rural development, they have a reseeding grant for communities to apply for reseeding money. If we did a coalition grant and set up some procedures and some stockpiles of seed and stuff under that grant, we could do it as our region, because like I said previously, our region is unique. We're unlike others. Superior isn't just Sonoran Desert. It's transitioned from Sonoran Desert to the chaparral. So we have both fuel types. So we're kind of an oddball, which is why we burn so much. That's true of our entire region. We're kind of unique. So working as a region makes a lot of sense for us, especially since one thing affects us all. But we've got the reseeding, we've got the fuel breaks and fire breaks that we could be doing as a region. All of these things start with the unsexy stuff of the planning process. We need a plan we can take and present to these grant underwriters, showing them that we've thought this out. So we need to start working together, same way we did on blight, to sit down and develop a plan and to have a communication strategy around getting people understanding our plan so we can get it funded.
Thank you, and that's a part of this question, right? The regional approach to communication and messaging. I'm kind of looking over to Mayor Gonzalez. Do you have anything you would add to that, or what you would like as a small town to focus on?
So as a small town, Miami they learned a lot. We learned a lot going through this, and in the process, we have to work, like Mayor Gamero stated earlier, we have to work on our emergency plan, update it. Our plan has been probably back in 1970, and so things have not changed, and so we have to work. So what we learned on this is to update that. The evacuation process that we had, 60% of our community in town of Miami was evacuated because of the fire, and there was a little bit of chaos on that. And so working with our emergency plan and trying to make it better, safer for our citizens, like I said, is benefit for us, because what took place, we can learn from it and help our citizens out.
Yeah, and quick follow-up to that. Going about updating the emergency operations plan for both Globe and Miami, do you have funds? Is this something that we should be going out after this and trying to seek funding to help out with that? Is there a way that some people here today could provide assistance with getting that going?
After 9/11, there was some funds that did help, especially with the fire service and emergency operations plan. And that's where we received funding to upgrade our plan, plus develop our own EOC, because you have to have, we had cabinets, we had phones, we had everything in place that if something did happen, we just put it there, and we had a place to all congregate and have our incident command post there. To be able to get the players in the same room so we could be sharing the same information. So back then there was funding, but that was after 9/11. Then everybody forgets about what happened in 9/11, and now we have floods and fires that we're going to need to get funding for.
So we'll figure some funding sources. Yeah, that's something we can do. Anything else to add to that, Mayor Gonzalez?
No, I think we hit it. There's always, need for any resources, especially in town of Miami, being so small. We always look for resources to help accommodate what we need to implement in our policies and procedures.
So, Supervisor Klein, anything to add on what these three gentlemen said?
These guys are right on track. The only thing I would add is that message to the public. And I think you ought to tailor it more like your Smokey the Bear message over the last 100 years. That was a very successful message that we all grew up with. But you need a message out there that doesn't shoot down that prescribed fire in these projects. You need a message out there that really promotes these projects and will bring awareness to everybody that, hey, this is a good thing. You might see some smoke in the air. You might be impacted by it for a few days, or you may be impacted by a little bit of traffic going around your place, doing some fuel breaks, whatever it is. But these are good things. And I think that message right now, the time is right for a message like that after what we've seen this summer. So.
One thing I noted when Mark was talking was how they got 2 houses to sign up for Firewise, and then other houses in the neighborhood wanted to follow along because they saw how it cleaned it up, and it was a great, funding source. And so, how do we do that? Let's focus the 2 homeowners and get it started.
Public relations.
Okay, well, so in our last few minutes, I wanted to spend time, speaking of communication and getting out to the public, what would you want to convey? Either something you've heard already in this meeting or your own message to your constituents, to your community.
I guess I can start. The county does have an emergency system, Everbridge. and, have our community, everybody in our surrounding areas to sign up for Everbridge. Don't wait for an emergency, have it already implemented in place. And so that's my message that I want to get out is just because we're in a non-emergency, sign up for Everbridge and get the word out to people.
I'm gonna text Carl in Melford and let him know you said that.
Carl did. During this time, he's done a great job.
He's giving $5 bills to people. Talk about. Very curious.
Yeah, I like the way you started your, the meeting yesterday is honest about honesty in your dialogue and your conversations. Because I say sometimes we're afraid to do that, I think, because we don't want to criticize our own. I think the gentleman that just said it on the video today, pointing fingers, and the critics out there criticizing or making accusations how the fire started, and also the strategy and the land that was burned. They need to understand, I think it begins with education, they need to understand how strategy and firefighting takes out in the forestry. And they need to understand that firefighter safety is the most important thing. We talked about, I think it was Ms. Browler from ADQ, and she talked about maybe having access to earlier hotshot crews and stuff. But I think with the forestry, they don't get their hotshot crews till they have the school kids, right? So it's really only summertime. But something that people don't realize, there's many departments that contract with the state land department. We have contracted in the city of Globe since 2001. And things changed when the Granite Hotshot crew was killed, 19 firefighters, because there was lawsuits and discussions about part-time and full-time. So once they determined some of these individuals were part-time, were full-time, determined full-time, it cost the city of Prescott lots of money because of the retirement system. So in Globe, we changed. We have a crew that we send out, an engine we send out since 2001 all over the north, the south, the southwest. But we changed now that we do not send any part-time firefighters on our engine, which hurt our staffing, because we don't want to run into the same situation where we would have to compensate for full-time benefits. It's huge, it really is. And we have public safety retirement for our firefighters and police, and I don't know why the forestry isn't on it. I mean, they're in hazard duty, they have a different type of retirement system, but we need to understand that it's all about liability also out there, because it is a dangerous profession when we're putting these people out there. So I think it's about education and people understanding strategy, suppression, I mean the whole thing. And I think this is important. I wish we had more of the public. And I think these need to continue. And hopefully through this organization, we can make that possible.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's the goal. Town manager, Craig?
To Al's point previously, one of the things that has come out of the changes in the fire behavior and in the shift to professional firefighters is that there's less off-duty, less gap-filling firefighting. It used to be the forestry would come to Superior and they would do a fire break or they would do a back burn just about every year. That stopped about a decade ago. That off-season work has meant that we have more fire loading up against our communities today and higher heat. So we're more at risk than we were 10 years ago. So the one of the big the dichotomies is here. So we've got the pro firefighters, and they are, Phoenix firefighter comes out, he makes $30 an hour in his regular day. He comes out on this fire, he's making $45 an hour, and we could pay a guy with a weed whacker to go around 6 months prior and cut all those weeds and give a defensible space, and we pay him $15 an hour. But we can get money for suppression, we can't get money for fire breaks. So that break, that investment for $20 million to put out the telegraph fire, but no money available to spend $1 million to do fire breaks to protect us from the next fire, needs to be addressed.
So a couple things, I think we're at the time now we're addressing this is the right time. There's different management strategies out there as far as field breaks and things like that. Grazing is one of them. Whether it's goats, cattle, horses, it doesn't matter. For $15 an hour, Todd, I'll put 100 head down there. We'll be good. So, so this is just, you got to take the blinders off. You really do. you gotta really take the blinders off, and every area is gonna be different in some ways. Whether it's the vegetation type, whether it's the design of the town that you're trying to protect, or community you're trying to protect, or the physical features coming into it, but every area is gonna be different. That's why these line officers and these area directors, like the BLM or state, whoever it is, they have the manpower behind them or below them to put these projects together and work with the fire departments, work with the mayors and things like that to do it. One thing that is real critical too, we've always think that by putting these field breaks in, we're protecting these houses and these communities, and you are. Or you're at least giving them a place to make a stand to try and protect them. It's also the opposite. When you put in these field breaks around homes and towns and communities, you're protecting the forest behind you. I don't know how many fires I've been on that came from somebody's backyard trash barrel. And after 3 days of running the door of the hill, you finally catch it. And so there's different ways, and that's why when you really settle into these groups and you start looking at things, you really have to open those blinders up and take a real strong look at it, and be a partner with the folks. Be a part of it. And if it's one main message I would give everybody is to be involved. I mean, we've got, what do we got here between Miami and Globe? 15,000 or so people. Yeah. We all sat here for how long and watched this go on, and then we watched all the flooding afterwards. I would have thought this room would have been packed today, to be honest with you. I mean, really what we're talking to here, we're preaching to the choir. We're preaching to you guys. A lot of you already know this, but so it would be nice to have a lot of these people more involved than they are, because we get the questions. My people, my departments, they all get the questions. How are you going to fix this? What are you going to do there? Where are we going? What are we doing? But so my main message to everybody out there would be involved.
That makes me think of the music events and all of the events where we need this message at those where the people are that didn't come today, but we got to get the message out more.
The one thing too, and I'll back up what Al had to say too, we don't need any more divisiveness. We don't need any division. We have an issue that we really need to work on and change. And I don't care what happened at the beginning of the fire or whatever else. But we have to work on this and work on the ways going forward, not backwards. And I think that as leaders of the communities, I think we have that responsibility to keep that in check and keep it headed the right way. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I just had a comment following up on that. Yeah, I think it's keeping the politics out of what is best for our communities is what is right. Todd is right. You know, that $100 million benefited all of us, but that was more a reactive response from the government. You know, and when we talk about the Telegraph fire and when we had a couple of structures burned, I don't know if we had more than 7. And we had a big meeting at the fairgrounds where we had the governor here, the senators here, the representatives here, and they allocated $100,000 for 2 large tents for animals. You know, when we could have done with one. It was $50,000 a week to put those shelters up at the high desert school. And then a week later, we've had 3 floods in the Globe Miami area, and you go to the 4-star mobile home park or Little Acres mobile home park, you had 42 trailers that were damaged in that flood. And they had 2 outhouses, a stack of water, no way to shower, nothing. Nothing was allocated. Nobody came to this community to offer us assistance. And we had humans out there that were living in their cars, living in damaged trailers. That isn't right. That's what I'm saying. We need to keep the politics out. Was a Telegraph fire a bigger event because it was a national event, and these little floods were really not as visible as they were?
I want to make sure if there are any burning questions in the audience, we can get those answered. And I don't know, Mayor Gonzalez, do you have anything else to say?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought I heard it. But yeah, anyone in the audience?
And so that state money there is some ways through there they imply, and so we've been working on that with a lot of these folks. I hope that everybody's getting the message out there so they know where to go, but we actually have contractors out there going around working with these landowners and the folks that's been burned out and impacted to apply for state money. It comes through us, we put it into the state, the Department of Forestry and Fire Management approves it. It's been a little hectic there, but I think we are getting it back on the ground. I hope we are. I keep trying to keep up with it as best I can, and it seems to be working as far as I know.
Just one, and as far as funding, just real quick, there is funding that was a United Fund of Globe Miami initiated a fundraiser and raised money, because that would go directly to the people that had private property or their property damage that they could allocate. So it went to the United Fund, they went to the Salvation Army, and there was raised, I think, $300,000 in our community, and mainly due to the mines in our community. Freeport, McMoran, Capstone, and BHP donated huge amounts of money to that. So that money is sitting there. So people need money for like sheetrock or personal items that were lost in the flood or the fire, they can apply to the Salvation Army.
That's great. We had requests for that kind of information before, so I'm glad you addressed that. I saw a question in the back, and we'll just end it with that last question.
When it comes to equipment and whatnot, it does get tough. And so we keep our employees on that equipment, running it and whatnot. And we do have a way of bringing back some folks like our retired operators to help. And unfortunately, through a lot of this, and the flooding in Little Acres was one of them, we were stretched way thin. And so there's always room for improvement, guaranteed. You're right on track with that. And there's different things we're trying to look at and see what we can do. So we're working on it.
One thing I would say too that we ran into when we requested resources from our county is that a lot of this equipment you see in the yards is paid through streets money. And if you use that equipment for anything other than streets, you get in trouble. So some of the resource requests we put in, we're told, no, I'm sorry, that's a streets piece of equipment and it can't be used for anything else. So
let me clarify one thing on that from Gila County, just so because I don't want to be lumped in the same deal with Pinal. But ours are the same way. Everything that sits in that yard has been bought and purchased through HERF dollars, which is the highway user fee tax money. So under normal circumstances, you have your driveway blow out for whatever reason, we can't come in there and fix it because it's private property. What we use that equipment for is mostly like public roads under contract with us to maintain. But there's an exception, and that is in the state of emergency, we have the ability to turn around and use that equipment in other places as well. We just have to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, so that we don't jeopardize that equipment and HERF money. So.
Thank you all so much. I just want to say that we're going to work really hard to get these quotes and messages out in local newspapers and local media sources, because these were really important messages, and thank you all for taking the time. Can we thank our panelists?